All right, so this week in Pax Day, we got the largest update in Pax Day history getting even bigger. First, it was the combat spotlight from last week showing all of the incredible changes that are coming with combat and the RPG systems. And then this week, we got the crafting spotlight, again, getting more details on all of the changes with armor and how skills and magic are working as well. But more importantly, we got as in-depth as mainframe will go into crafting. So we're going to talk about all of that and a little bit more. Hello and welcome all of you incredibly professional consumers of Pax Day and Pax Day related content out there. I'm Altari, the professional gamer, and this is another episode of the PAX Friday Review, the show where we talk about all of the fun, interesting, new, and exciting information that has dropped for Pax Day over the last week. There's only a couple more weeks left until June 20th, which is the soft, unofficial potential last day that verse 3 is coming out, and we are continuing this roll on really awesome spotlights that mainframe has been pointing out. Last week we talked about RPG systems and combat. This week we're talking more about crafting, but we also see some of the effects of the RPG systems on crafting. If you were at all interested in crafting before, this update is going to be even better. You're going to get a lot more out of crafting than what you were previously to this update. And if you tried crafting previously in PAX Day and you're like, yeah, this is too much, I don't know if I want to get into it, now is the time, because there's going to be a lot more intricacy to it, but also a lot more to do with it. The system is getting better, in my opinion. We're going to talk about that. And in order to do that, we're going to go over to playpaxday.com. But before we do, I would like to extend a special thanks to all of our supporters who are helping the channel monetarily, our channel members. I thank you so much for your support. I would also like to say, if you do like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe so you can get notified whenever we come out with new Pax Day or Pax Day related content, and share with any of your friends who might be interested in learning or relearning or getting exposed to Pax Day for the first time. Let's head over to playpaxday.com to talk about this crafting spotlight. I'll see you over there. All right, and here we are on playpaxday.com, and there are several different pictures that are here. We're gonna talk about those in detail, and there's some really interesting things to kind of pull out from that, but let's take a look at the post first and foremost, and then we'll get to the pictures. It is important to note that anything that we talk about right now, there might be some minor changes that are occurring from the point in time that this has been published and the point in time that the verse 3 is officially released. And with this particular spotlight, what we're talking about is the changes to crafting. Now, crafting before verse 3 was something that took a lot of time, a lot of effort. It was a lot of repetition, and it seemed like there was really no reward for doing it past getting your first piece of gear. This is intrinsically changing, and I think you can narrow it down into a couple of different pillars. The first one is that early stage materials, early stage things that are crafted are going to have importance at later stages in the crafting process. So early people who are blacksmiths, for example, will be able to still make stuff in the production or supply chain for later stage, higher end gear to make the value still there for players. And that's critically important for the economy so that you don't end up a year down the line where nobody's making early game stuff. There's no need for it. There's no market for it. Everyone, it's just a lopsided economy. Everything's at the end game, and there's not still manufacturing going on in the beginning. That's not going to be the case here. In addition, talking about getting players on board, another key pillar for early players is to make it easier to get into crafting. And what that means is that they're getting rid of some of the interdependencies between professions at the earlier stage, but then those start coming in later and later and later. It's also important to note that the bottlenecks that did exist are trying to reduce or eliminate those in one way or another. So one of the most common points of feedback from players was, starting a crafting profession felt very unclear, and it was overly dependent on other people in order to do. So how are they fixing that? They're making it faster and simpler to start a core profession, which I found interesting that they're calling it any core profession. I do wonder what the difference is between a profession and a core profession. But either way, removing the need for a dedicated processing crafter to begin basic crafting. So in order to do that, obviously we have the new sites near the Petra Days, where you can see one right here. There's all of the initial crafting stations. So players don't have to go and place their plots immediately and then just get to building, and everyone's building the same stuff. All of that can be placed here, or used here to say for better. Now, they also wanted to streamline the early game to help you get into the loop quickly without getting stuck on certain bottlenecks. So if you've been doing crafting in Pax Dei and you remember leveling up in certain places in the crafting chain as you level up, there's just parts where you're reliant, you're waiting on something else happening, or you need to get to a certain point, you need to level to a certain point, and that was creating bottlenecks. So they're trying to reduce that. They want to lower the barriers to entry to make it easy for people to progress early on and therefore more rewarding. Those rewards are tangible to the players, which then entice them to continue to level and progress in their various trade professions. They also wanted to make real complexity, not just confusion. So crafting should grow deeper as you master it, not just more time consuming. So it's important to note that they don't want something to just take more time. They want it to become a deeper experience as you are actually getting further along in your profession. And they're adding a real structure and logical depth to recipes across the tiers. So tiered complexities, T1 recipes remain simple, but higher tiers introduce more layered ingredients onto those chains. So a great example, actually, you might have noticed it if you're taking a look at these pictures or these images, but down here, you should be able to see there is a you might have to take my word for it because this dang thing is so huge. The wrought iron cuirass that is right here, that is now not a piece of gear like we were used to before. That is a subcomponent. It is an ingredient. So the wrought iron cuirass is an ingredient that goes into making the chest plate or the chest piece for a craft. And the reason why that is important is because as you're growing, as you're getting more materials, more things, those individual subcomponents are going to go into crafting the piece, and there's variability in that, so it allows for more depth, but it also means that people can specialize in making certain subcomponents as well, as opposed to just making the endpoint. So cross-profession clarity, components will now more clearly belong to your profession or to another, reducing the ambiguity of it. That obviously, especially when we're talking about the armor smithing versus leatherworking versus tailoring, armor smithing uses the same materials as leatherworking, uses the same materials as tailoring, but at different quantities across the board. It did make it quite confusing for players as to which one they were doing, and this is going to become all the more important now because with new RPG systems, players are going to actually be playing in light armor or medium armor or heavy armor, and these distinctions are going to be important for the crafters so that they know what they need to gather at what quantities and be more specific towards that. And then in addition to that, here's the persistent value that I talked about at the very beginning. Early tier items, especially tier 1, retain relevance at higher tiers as ingredients or in alternate recipes. So when I hear alternate recipes, I do think that this is going to have something to do maybe with the cosmetic system, where you're going to be able to change the appearances of some of these by altering the patterns, altering the types of fabrics or materials that are used, and that will give off different looks for your pieces, not just in terms of the actual physical model or like how it looks, but what textures are used on the thing that's being made. But either way, these early items are still going to maintain their value, which is critically important when you get an economy that's a developing or a fully developed economy, where you're still going to need early stage players, new players that are coming to the game. They need to be able to support themselves. And what you don't want is 7 years down the line, having all these new players coming in and no economy to actually participate in because they're not there yet. So that is a really important thing that players need, is to have that persistent value. In addition to that, they want smarter dependencies. So crafting collaboration is good, but the dependencies shouldn't be frustrating. And they want to restructure how players rely on each other. So components from other professions will now be at least one tier lower. So in that way, if you are crafting a top tier armor smithing component or an armor smithing piece, then the subcomponents that you're going to be getting from those things are going to then be at the lower tier. So one tier lower than where you're at. So if you're using steel, then instead of fine leather, you're going to need just normal leather. Or instead of having a fine linen cloth, you'd be using just your standard leather or fine or standard linen string or standard linen cloth instead. So that is an important distinction to have, because now that's going to make the interdependencies a little bit better. And it also, in some ways, does help more solo or smaller group oriented players that are leveling multiple professions at the same time, because then they are going to be able to get more focused in one and maybe a little bit less in another, but still be able to continue progression in the one that they're actually truly focused on. And this is going to hopefully eliminate deadlocks and confusion, is what they're claiming for it. And it also helps reduce crafting overhead when you're focused on progressing in one specific field. They also want it to be better pacing. So they want it to be more about what you're doing in the world, how you're gathering materials, and less about just sitting at a crafting bench. I just leveled blacksmithing to level 40, and by I mean members of the Golden Company helped carry my dead corpse over the finish line to get to level 40 in blacksmithing, who I greatly appreciate their help with doing that. But right then and there, I was spending about 2 to 3 hours of crafting at a table for no real net benefit other than making number go big. And what this pacing topic is really pointing out at is getting players out into the world more, be more focused on gathering materials, more focused on being out than standing at a table for hours and hours and hours on end, watching a blue bar go across the screen. So they are increasing the importance of gathering. They're also including adjusting the yields, increasing costs, and XP multipliers to reflect this particular philosophy as well. So that's all great. So at the end, they want you to be spending more time gathering, hunting, mining, and doing what drives your progress. So you feel like you're actively engaged in these things, not just standing still and watching your bar change places. So then they also said, what's new in the toolbox? This revamp comes with new workflows, new materials, and ultimately new gear. Here are some of the highlights. So new workflow, as they mentioned previously in the RPG update, these crafting changes are designed to support and enhance a new combat system. That's why tailoring, leatherworking, and blacksmithing are the three professions undergoing the most drastic changes. There's new spells, new gear stats requiring new crafting inputs. Combat roles like tank, DPS, and healer are now reflected in the types of gear that can be crafted, and recipes have been reworked and will provide tactical choices for builders, gatherers, and fighters. So we have all of these pictures here of the various different types. And then in addition to that, they also said new crafting components. So most professions are gaining a full suite of new intermediate materials designed to support the new tiered structure. These parts will appear at different tiers and will help distinguish recipes by complexity and function. So for example, a leather worker is now going to work with an intermediary material like leather splits, and that's going to be available at various qualities. This gives more control over final item quality and adds depth to the leatherworking progression. So what I think this means, and we'll have to wait and see because it was kind of ambiguous, but on this leather splits thing, what is really, really important to note is that it says available in various qualities. So you can attempt to make leather splits at different levels of quality. And then when you do that, it'll affect your final item quality as well. I've seen this in other games before. At one point in time, a really small sandbox MMO called Last Oasis tried to do this, where you would have effectively quality numbers, and your goal was to try and get the average number as high as you could. So the subcomponents that are going into a piece of armor in that game, you'd have one that's like 25, one that's 25, one that's 25, and one that's 25. When you put them all together, what's the average? Well, it's 25. So then the output of that would be, you guessed it, 25. And what that system did is it incentivized players to try to pick and choose what things they made at higher quality, what things they made at lower quality. And there was a whole scaling system that went into it on, do you invest in a lot of things to make them all high quality, or do you just invest in making one thing very high quality and then hoping that average carries out across all of the materials in a lot better fashion? That was very interesting to play around with, though it was ultimately exploited in a way. I do think Mainframe is possibly looking into something like that system here, so I'm going to be interested to see where they go. And we actually do get a glimpse at what these item qualities are. If you went and saved these images, I always go and save all the images that are published by Mainframe on my own local computer, and I happen to look at some of the names of these documents. So if you look here, it goes from common to, or average, to uncommon to rare. And I didn't even notice what I was looking at, but if you go and look at these images, you have yellow pips versus green pips versus blue. So this is actually the differences between the rarities. And it also, if you're looking at the particular spells that are located on them, that also has an effect too. So we'll talk about those spells here in a quick minute. But in addition to that, new items replacing old gear. So almost all existing crafted gear, including weapons, are going to be phased out and replaced with newly designed items that better match the revamped progression and balance systems. So if you've been hoarding mats for that perfect build, keep an eye on the new crafting tables. What's viable and valuable is about to change, and it's about to change significantly. So that might be a commentary on everyone who is throwing away worn out lockets and worn out sigils and all of the lower tier relics, but it also could mean for all of the basic generic recipes that are coming. And yeah, it makes it sound like there's going to be a very large shakeup with crafting. Ultimately, that is a good thing. I know that a lot of players are probably going to be upset and shook by the fact that some of the stuff that they have been saving is now useless or not as useful or not as impactful as they thought, and that some of the stuff that they weren't hoarding just is innately better now. So this is all a part of the balancing. It's good that Mainframe is doing this now rather than after release, and verse 3 is just the next step before release occurs. So these types of changes are really, really good. And at the end of the day, they're just trying to make crafting more rewarding, more fun, more engaging, and have more value to players who are pursuing those paths. So in that, we also did get 3 different images here. We have the Pilgrim set, the Shepherd set, and the Hunter set. And what I found interesting here, so the Shepherd set wasn't the full Shepherd set, by the way. They also had a Vanguard set in here. And it makes me wonder if there are particular set bonuses or something like that, because here we had all of the Pilgrim set, and this is the helmet, the leg guards, the sabatons, and the breastplate. But we did get to see a couple of different spells here as well, as what probably excited me the most. This was something that existed way earlier in Pax Dei, and it disappeared for a long, long time. If we just look right here, this is boots. We've got boots. We finally got some boots. So that is a good sign right there. I know there's a lot of people who are happy about that. But either way, what new spells do we get to see here? We got Kill Mark, Netfall, Shadow Charge, and then Breath of Joy 2. So up until this point, we only had Breath of Joy 1. Breath of Joy was the speed, kind of a speed buff, but also you didn't have to spend stamina to sprint, more so. And that Breath of Joy 2 is on the rare medium boots, but then the Breath of Joy 1 is located on just the common tier 3 heavy boots instead. So we have spells that are being shared across. I think this is going to be the case for a lot of them, mostly because they have all this variability, and I feel like there's only so many spells that are actively in game right now. But we also got this Shadow Charge. So Shadow Charge to me looked interesting. It almost looked like it was possibly something where you shadow step to the target, or something's going on. Either way, the Hunter set definitely seems more of the stealthy subtype here. We didn't see the specific ability that was mentioned last week that is intended to make them go into stealth for a short period of time. So I found that interesting. But then we have Kill Mark, which probably is something that's going to allow you to do more damage over time on the targeted kill marked foe. And then I don't know what Netfall is. It sounds pretty cool though. Then we do have the Shepherd set, or at least part of it. This does look like it has some components of healing here. We have Verdant Mend, Pacify, and Spirit Stride. So my thought on Spirit Stride is that it's probably something that's going to allow you to recharge your spirit over time while getting maybe a speed buff that allows players who are mages or spellcasters using a lot of spirit. You can use Spirit Stride to kind of reposition yourself while getting maybe a little bit better recharge rate on your spirit, which is what you use to cast spells. If you are just tuning in and didn't watch last week's video on the new RPG systems, Pacify, though we did get a new logo for it, I believe it is the same Pacify that we've had previously. And then Verdant Mend, I think, might be the Radiant Mend that we've had before, except maybe it is more of a heal over timey type thing. So it's still an AoE, but you're giving people a heal over time, as opposed to an AoE where you're doing a burst heal, which might be the Cleric set. That's just an inclination. I don't know if that's true or not. And we also got this Sacrament of Strife on the legs. This is the Vanguard set, so this is kind of different. I don't know what that is. I'd be interested to see what you all think it is in the comments down below. And then we got the Pilgrim set. So Pilgrims seems like it's actually really just the Aureale's leggings, like the set that we had currently, where you have Breath of Spirit, Breath of Balance, Breath of Joy, Breath of Life. Breath of Spirit, I don't think that we actually had Breath of Spirit previously, but maybe I'm just misremembering. But all of these do seem like the pieces that we've already gotten in game, except now they're on a heavy armor set as opposed to the light armor that we have in game currently. So Breath of Life is most likely the heal over time, single target on yourself outside of combat. Breath of Balance is the single target stamina heal, possibly, or your own self-targeted stamina heal. And then Breath of Joy is to move faster. Breath of Spirit, my guess is you're a single target increased heal over time or not heal over time, but spirit increase over time that allows you to regen some of your mana over a period. So that's all that we have for today in terms of crafting changes. The one thing that I did want to note is we got a whole lot of something, but a whole lot of nothing at the same time. We didn't actually get to see what and how crafting is changing. We just got a lot of descriptions for the goals of why it is changing. So there's still actually a lot to uncover in terms of what has changed, what's going to be different. And I do think that's why the wipe is happening and everyone's getting reset in terms of all of their materials are getting put back down to their most basic essence. And that's because Mainframe wants to understand and have everyone experiment with these crafting pathways and really work them out and understand them more. So this adds a little bit more context to it, which I appreciate. I'm really excited for crafting coming, and I'm really excited for the customization system that's probably going to be coming with this. I feel like there's a whole subcomponent system where you're going to be able to mix and match things at some point, and that's going to have different outputs, and we're going to have to experiment and play with it. But either way, I'm really excited for these changes. I hope you are too. Let me know down in the comments what you're thinking. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this type of content and want to stay connected whenever we post new videos about Pax Dei, and share with any of your friends who might be interested in learning more. Thanks. I'm Altai, the Professional Gamer.